awesome just to keep our bandwidth down, and it helps a lot with kind of having a clean call to record. If you have any technical questions, you can message Jael. You can use the chat function at the bottom, and Jael is another one of our organizers here at 350, and she's taking care of the tech tonight for this event. And just also, as always, this event is like for all of you all out in the audience, so we want it to be as interactive as possible. If you ever have a question, just put an asterisk in the chat and we'll get to you as quick as you can, or you can just type your question in the chat and we'll be watching the chat and get to it really soon as we're going. And to kind of get discussion flowing, hear about what you're all thinking about and what might have brought you here, we want to kind of just ask the question, what is the biggest issue you think of related to the future of farming in Vermont? So if you can open up the chat, again, this will be good practice to use the chat function, but just hit the chat icon at the bottom and just share any thoughts you have. What is kind of the biggest or big issue that you're thinking about for the future of agriculture in Vermont? So we have a couple great things to think about already. Loss of farmland, short growing season, and the need to become self-sufficient. Land access for aspiring farmers. I'd mentioned extreme weather. Lisa brought up stable markets. Pesticide effects on biodiversity and human health. That's from John, one of our panelists. Getting high quality local fresh food to Vermont year round. Ooh, that's a good one. And Jesse, another one of our panelists, brought up availability of knowledge base in the network of people and businesses that support agriculture. Maggie brought up indoor and vertical. Jael, transitioning away from conventional farming to a statewide regenerative model. So this is kind of everything from the biological to the economic, the markets, and then a lot of the social. And hopefully we'll be touching on kind of all of those as we go tonight. So now I'm going to briefly let Jael and Sophia introduce themselves. There are two other 350 staff members on the call tonight, and they'll tell you about a little bit where this campaign or this event fits in with 350 Vermont's work, and then we're going to get started and hear right from our farmers.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining. My name is Jael Polskamp. I am a collective member of 350 Vermont and the field organizer for Vermont's Solutions campaign. And last November, we launched our Put Soil in the Carbon campaign, which was really geared around building soil health as a climate solution. And we've been working with our local groups to help reshape Vermont's food system and educate people about healthy soils and regenerative agriculture as a climate solution. I'm also an organic vegetable grower. I've been growing for 18 years in Vermont. Mostly grow Brussels sprouts. And yes, I work part-time at 350 Vermont and more than full-time as a farmer. And we just, as part of our Put Carbon in the Ground campaign, we launched a project last week, which is called the ReWild Vermont Project, where we are ambitiously trying to plant 100,000 trees by 2022. And we're hoping that a lot of those are, well, trees and bushes are food producing species that can be used to help feed Vermonters. And I'm going to pass it off to Sophia.
Thanks, Jael. I am the office manager for 350 Vermont here in Burlington, and also a longtime organic gardener and garden educator. And I'm also very passionate about regenerative agriculture, so it's really exciting to be part of this conversation tonight, and I'm just going to be helping to facilitate a little bit as needed. So I'll hand it back to Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. Just a few other things before we get started. I'm going to share a document with everyone in the chat. And so at the end of the session, we're going to have breakout groups for 20 to 25 minutes where we can all go into smaller groups and discuss a more specific topic that you're really interested in. And those topics, we're going to have John Hayden as part of a group just talking about growing with perennial polycultures and low-till, low-input farming. Jesse Cayenne will help us talk about land access and thinking about different ways that we can bring justice and get more people on the land in this time when we need a lot of people farming. And Lisa is gonna be part of a discussion on bringing farms into sustainability education and activism in different ways. So if you, sometime during this discussion, and I'll give you all another reminder throughout, but if you go to the link that's right now in the chat, that Google Doc, and you just type your name under the breakout session that appeals most to you, then we'll be able to kind of sort you all out later in the session. And then just briefly about the agenda. Right now we're going to hear from each of our 3 farmer panelists for about 7 to 10 minutes apiece. And we're going to launch into a panel discussion after that. So we have some questions prepared, our 350 staff, but then we're also really welcoming questions from all you in the audience, whatever kind of brought you here tonight, what you're curious about as far as farming, climate change, and regenerative ag. So that's when we're really going to be looking for questions in the chat, comments, anything on your mind. And with that, I think we'll start. We're going to turn it over to John for the first introduction to his farm, the Farm Between, up in Jeffersonville. And John, you're welcome to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm set. Everybody can see my Farm Between logo? Screen? Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks for having me on this Zoom call. I'm sorry we can't all meet in person these days, and these Zoom calls can be a little daunting after a while, but hopefully we can learn a lot and get to talk and be virtually connected. So anyway, this is the Farm Between, where Nancy and I in the picture have lived and farmed for the past 28 years. And we're right between Cambridge and Jeffersonville in northern Vermont, right near Smuggler's Notch. And we are a perennial fruit farm now. I'm going to tell a little bit about our history, but this is what we've evolved to. We grow kind of some of the normal fruits that people are used to buying and eating, like apples and raspberries and rhubarb. But let me see, this acts like a pointer, doesn't it? My arrow. So up here by my thumb, we have honeyberries, haskaps that we grow. We grow a lot of the ribes, or red currants, black currants, gooseberries. We grow elderberries and aronia. Lots of different crops. Last time I counted, we had 30 different crops that we were growing and selling, and that diversity helps us be more resilient. So that's something that we've actually planned on having, and helps spread the workload throughout the season. And we are certified organic through Vermont Organic Farmers. We also have a fruit nursery where we sell edible landscaping plants, like all the fruit trees and berry bushes. And we also have focused a lot on pollinator-friendly trees and shrubs so that people can expand their own biodiversity. Just a quick history of the farm. We bought it in the fall of 1992, and it looked like this. It was a very pristine dairy farm. Everything was mowed. There's a weed whacker up to the edge of the barn, and just everything was in place. But they had gone out of business as a dairy. So people look at this as iconic, prosperous farm, but not really, because they had gone out of business. So fast forward a couple of decades, and we've planted it up with all kinds of stuff, and it looks pretty scruffy to most people of conventional mindset and conventional aesthetics, but we think it's beautiful. The functional beauty of it is overwhelming to us, and we're doing pretty well. So this is the new face of a prosperous farm. So Nancy and I are both ecologists by training, and Nancy's also an environmental engineer. And so we like to look at systems and try to think holistically. So something that we've understood, I think we all understand when we come into this world, but maybe we lose it through our training, is that everything is interconnected. We're also, this comfrey plant in our orchard is pulling nutrients from deep with its taproot and bringing them up to the leaves, and then we can cut the leaves with our scythe and use them for mulch on our trees, and they'll feed those shallow tree roots while also keeping the grass from out competing for them. They're great food for the bumblebees, who are also our pollinators. And it's really hard to just tweak things apart when you're creating a whole system. It doesn't work without all the pieces in there. And so we have a book, which I'll show you a cover of in a little bit. And this is a map from our book. I just wanted to give you an idea of the layout of the farm. It's just 18 acres. It's not a huge farm, but we have a lot of stuff crammed in there. And from the beginning, we set out to create this robust, resilient farm ecosystem. And so what we mean by robust is something that doesn't really get affected by changes. It can withstand changes. And then resilient is something that can bounce back from changes that have overwhelmed its robustness. So we want to be able to bounce back. And we do this through the biodiversity and our native plantings. And we try to make this complex food web while doing this all no-till. We're not fans of tillage anymore after having been full-till vegetable farmers for quite a few years. We kind of changed our ways. But anyway, so you can get an idea of all the different colors and different things going on here. The front part of the farm here, which is blown up in the top right, you can see we don't have any monocultures of anything really. Even if we have a lot of black currants in 3 or 4 spots, that might add up to several hundred plants. They're all in clumps. So we don't really get into this mechanistic monoculture mindset that is prevalent in today's world of farming. And then, we call ourselves a regenerative farm because we think regenerative is an important idea. That, the big thing throughout my career was sustainable agriculture. Even when I was young in my 20s, 40 years ago, we were talking about low input sustainable agriculture. And the idea of sustainability was to maintain the status quo, right? So we can keep things going. But we're so far beyond that now with our ecological problems and social problems that we need things that are going to make things better. So that's where this regenerative comes in. We're not just trying to do no further harm. We're trying to improve things. So we can do that through increasing the biodiversity. We have this mass species extinction going on the planet now related to climate change and other factors. A lot of pesticide use. They're prevalent everywhere in our food and water and air and soil. And those are having their long-term effects on biodiversity. So we're also sequestering carbon both in our soil and in our above ground plants. We're cleaning the water by having our riparian zones or ditches or streams with creating biomass with trees growing along there. We're enhancing wildlife habitat. So we're just trying to make things better on this little patch of earth that we're the stewards of. And the history goes, and I think Lisa might remember from way back when we were doing more livestock, we started out as a livestock farm, rotational management intensive, rotational grazing, multi-species. We were doing meat, chickens and turkeys and lambs and pigs, and we farmed with horses, and we have throughout until we've gone no-till and our horses retired. But it was very livestock intensive, and this was great because that farm that we bought had the soil fertility was gone. They've been taking the hay off of that for years and years and not putting anything back on it. So it was good to bring the livestock in. They spread their own manure around. We imported grain and fed them that, and that became soil fertility for a lot of them. The sheep didn't need the grain, but they were grazing and assimilating that plant material and running it through their digestive system and making things better. And then we did a lot of vegetable farming also. We incorporated our livestock with the vegetables and rotating fields, and we'd graze chickens down the rows or rabbits down the rows here of our cover crops. And we were using black plastic, and even the annual tillage we were seeing was having effects on our soil tilth and the structure of the soil. We were starting to see some little crusting, things like that. And I'm an entomologist, so I like to pay attention to the little things that are on Earth, which are the insects and other microarthropods. So we noticed that tilling and stuff was not good for them. So we've gone away from tilling, even though I thought we were doing a good job vegetable farming, and also frankly the economics of the vegetable farming were tough. We were busting our butts and not getting a great return. So we were having like a midlife crisis in the farm with the vegetable farming, lugging zucchinis and digging potatoes, and we had a CSA, but it was a 24-member CSA, which we loved, and it was just grueling work, and we weren't getting a lot back. And then we had a couple floods in 2011. That was with Hurricane Irene, and we had a spring flood that year also. And so when it floods, our back barn gets water in it, and a couple of our fields flood, and we lose crops and stuff. So it's a big pain. So this really was like a way to break us out of the doldrums of what we were doing and make us create change on our own farm. So we started going with a lot of perennials and perennial polyculture. This is just an example. We planted one field that was susceptible to flooding, and we'd lost some annual crops in it in that year, 2011. We had corn and potatoes and beans in it and lost them all. So we switched that over to aronia and elderberries, which you can see in the picture here, because they can withstand being underwater for a day or two. And that's happened subsequently, so we're glad we've done that. They also like the heavier soils there, and they're not good for drought, so they like it wet. But that's just one example of how we reacted to climate change. We just had this book published by Chelsea Green last year, so if anybody wants to delve deeper into our practices and philosophies, this is available. But basically, I think what we've learned over the 28 years of being stewards of this land is that it's a story of belonging. So we really, and not just specifically to this piece of land, but to the whole biosphere. If you're looking holistically at the big picture, we're just this little speck of dust hurtling through the cosmos with this little thin biofilm on it of air, water, and soil. And we're all connected, and we're all in this together, and we all belong to each other, and it all belongs to us. And so this idea of creating the other, like other weeds are the enemy, or insects are gonna have a war on bugs, or even other people, other races, or people from other countries as the other, is really a self-defeating thing for human society. So I think just the lessons of our years here have been that we really need as a society to get back to this idea of belonging, and that we all belong to each other, and we all belong on this little speck of dust hurtling through the cosmos, and we should take care of each other. So that's what I got. Did I unshare my screen?
I believe so, yeah.
Stop share. There it is.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, good.
Thank you so much, John,
Yeah.
for sharing. I'm sure that inspired a lot of thought and questions from folks. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa now to introduce herself, share a little about her farm, and yeah.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can make the screen share work.
Yeah, let us know. If you click the share screen button at the bottom and then choose the window you want, should.
Okay. Here we are.
Awesome. Yeah, we can see that.
But let's see, it's not doing the slideshow though.
You can hit play from the start in the upper left.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
There we go. Okay. Great. So Earthwise Farm and Forest, my husband, Carl Russell, and I, we're located in Bethel, Vermont, as though our mailing address is Randolph. And so that confuses people quite a bit, but we're just a couple miles outside of the Randolph border. This Zoom stuff is new to me, so bear with me. So we're a certified organic draft animal powered farm. This aerial map gives you the scope of our land base, where we own 188 acres and we rent another 14. The 14 acres that we rent is pasture, and we're progressively creating more pasture on our 188 acres, though you can see the breakdown that we have a lot of pine plantation that that was planted as a conservation planting in the 50s. So that is being turned back into pasture, and that surrounds the main homestead house that's on the property. And I don't know, okay, I can do a pointer, huh? So this is let me see, this is the homestead farm right here. And up here is the log house that Carl and I built as a addition onto the home property. And further past the log house, if you go this way, we have some more woodlands. So our acreage span is beyond the map here, but you can see that we've got sugar bush, mixed forest of about 120 acres, pasture of 25, about an acre's worth of gardens. And as we're opening up pasture, we're incorporating more perennial edible landscapes, some fruit trees and nuts, and we're really inspired by the work that John and Nancy's doing. So we hope to be able to add and incorporate that onto our property. We have a diverse amount of livestock, and we have a lot of baskets of different enterprises that we do on our farm. And we consider ourselves to be a homestead farm where our primary goal is to raise food for our family and then to market a small amount to our outside community. So we use draft horses, oxen, and with that, they do a lot of our forest work. Our fields are now into perennial sod. We're not tilling our gardens anymore. We've got raised beds with sod in between that we clip when needed. But oh my God, our meat birds, we raise 250 meat birds a year, not 2,000. So that's a typo. We've got some layers. We raise heritage turkeys and a few pigs every year that we use as a tool to clear some of this land that we're bringing back into pasture. And I'll show you a few different pictures as we go. We have a mission on our farm to steward the land in a way that promotes a healthy and robust soil biology and forest ecosystem that also increases carbon sequestration, improves water quality, and increases the water holding capacity of our soils. Our products, as you can see, are grass-fed meats, pork, chicken, heritage turkey, beef. We do all our own slaughtering, so everything's on-farm slaughtered, which is a big part of our farm, wanting to be closely connected to whatever we're raising and growing on our farm, having that intimate connection. We sell raw milk off our farm, some vegetables, a number of forest products from maple syrup to lumber and firewood, and a number of different preserves, flowers and crafts. And the other thing that we do on our farm quite a bit are the educational workshops, ranging from having a family cow to management intensive grazing to learning how to dowse and developing a spiritual connection to the land or to your inner self, to finding water, and let's see, making butter, yogurt, and cheese. Though with COVID, some of those intimate workshops that bring us closer together have been tabled for now until we can figure out how to do that again. So, and we offer farm tours, so which we can do under today's climate with private groups to give them a look at what our homestead farm looks like. What are the enterprises? Where are they on the farm, and how do we manage them? What scale are we at, and why do we stay at the small scale that we're at? Or looking at our how we manage our water systems, how we build soil, how we build our pastures, all that gets included in the farm tours that we offer. Just some pictures of our kids are a little bit older now, but you can see that they've been involved in the process from the very beginning, and it really shows in what they're doing today and where they're going. And what we're planning these days is succession planning, or really before succession planning, incorporating one or two of our kids onto the farm with enterprises that can also, that we can make room for another individual or two within our farm business structure. So that's exciting that they're wanting to come back to the farm. With our management intensive grazing system, we manage our pigs and our poultry, our cows, our horses, our oxen. We have a number of different groups of livestock that we manage on pasture for various goals. The pigs are clearing what was wooded areas and bringing it back into meadow or pasture, and our poultry are taking then those cleared areas, and with the manure and the imported grain that we feed them, they're leaving a lot of good nutrients back in the soil, allowing for a good pasture species to settle into those areas so that we can build our perennial pastures. Our dairy cows would then be the next group, or our oxen and our steers and our horses, to start grazing those areas in a rotational system to again make those pastures more healthy, more robust, to build carbon, build organic matter, increase biodiversity, and increase the volume of feed on those pastures. And our draft animals, now that they're not doing much field work unless they're clipping or mowing, are used in the woods for harvesting our timber or our firewood. Harvesting our sap from our irrigation, but with the weird winters that we've been having, and we don't have a lot of flat land, we're usually dealing with a lot of ice and heavy snow that's unpredictable. So it makes the footing a little too challenging. So we've gone from having our animals pull along a tank with buckets, we've gone to a pipeline. So compromises that have to be made with climate change, but we've got plenty for our draft animals. This is there were some dairy bulls that were born on our farm that have been trained as a really good team of oxen. And part of our farm is just the lifestyle that we have on the farm. So it's not just what we're growing, and it's not the animals and the plants necessarily, but it's the whole picture of building a log home from the timber on our property, setting it up with an off-grid system, gravity-fed water, composting toilets, solar panels as our primary source of energy, having a root cellar to store our food through the winter. The energy consumption of our household is at about 20% of what the average American household would use, through all the various conservation practices that we have on the farm. So from the gravity-fed water system to heating our water with wood heat, or we have copper panels in the summer, all of those things really contribute a lot to the amount of energy that we don't need for our household. And let's see if I can get this, here we go. and intimacy with our food system. When we work with, whether we have classes coming or farm tours or bringing in interns, or whether Carl, who's a forester, he has an ecological forestry business. You know, we'll consult off the farm, sharing the expertise that we have from what we do on our operation, but we also have people coming to us whether they want to learn how to slaughter chickens. They'll come and help us out on a slaughter. And I gotta say, I learned how to slaughter chickens from John way back in the day. And we'll bring woofers or interns that can learn a little bit about what we're doing on the farm on a day-to-day basis, and exchange labor in exchange for education. So we have a lot of different things that we do to bring people to our farm to share what we're doing, and to hopefully inspire other people to take some of that back to wherever they're located when they're getting started or making improvements on their. So just a picture of sharing our lifestyle through education and internships. And I know I'm going to be on a breakout session talking about just activism as well. And my husband and I have both been board members for rural Vermont and have spent a lot of time at the State House, and have advocated a lot for on-farm slaughter, raw milk, a number of other things that are really focused on making sure that the small scale farm still has a place in the state, and that we can make things economically viable for those small scale enterprises that are trying to really create vibrant farmsteads with regenerative practices, with economic stability, as well as building those networks so that people can share and learn together. And then, like I said, I mentioned that we do all our slaughtering is done on farm, whether it's the beef animal that we're raising, to our poultry, to the occasional dairy cow that gets retired, our pigs, our turkeys. We take our relationships with our animals very personally, and we want to be responsible for their life as well as their death, wanting to make sure that they're being handled well, that the death is quick, and that it's more about how they lived on the farm and how they integrated with the whole farm as an organism. So to send them off somewhere else to be slaughtered just does not fit our philosophy and our mission. And we find that some of our customers are really interested in animals that were slaughtered on farm for a lot of those reasons. So we see that growing, but we also find that there's education. People need to know how to do this right. So it's an important piece to the puzzle. And I think that was it for the slides. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. And in a sec, we'll transition to hearing from Jesse, and then we'll launch into our panel discussion. But Lisa, if you're able to unshare your screen, that would be.
Hey all.
Stop share, there we go.
Okay. All right. It's all yours, Jesse, whenever you're ready.
Thanks. Thanks, Lisa and John. So I'm Jesse, and my wife and I, Caitlin, and I run Wild Carrot Farm in Brattleboro. And we're a small, diversified, mostly vegetable farm. We're in our 10th year or so doing this. And we raise 250 varieties of vegetables or so, and herbs and flowers, and we raise some mushrooms. We do most of our field work with draft horses as well. There seems to be a theme here. it's neat to have some draft representation. And we also raise some meat chickens and turkeys and pigs on occasion. We used to have sheep. We don't anymore. We traded those for our kids. We may do sheep again someday. And most of our food goes to a CSA that happens on the farm. So we have about 150 members now who come to the farm each week and pick up food through 6 months or 7 months out of the year. And we have a farm store that's makes up a good portion of our sales as well. And I guess our farm is sort of built around a community model trying to, our land is owned by a land trust, not the Vermont Land Trust, but a local land trust called the Earthbridge Community Land Trust. We have a lifetime lease here. We are, so we think of our land in a little bit differently than in the sort of traditional private model. We think about it as through like a stewardship lens of that we are the folks who are kind of here to take care of things right now, and that there will be other folks after us, and there certainly were other folks before us, and we it kind of informs how we include other folks on the land. So our land is open for people to use, walking. Right now, there's all sorts of creative uses going on because of the nature of the world. Our high tunnel is going to be turned into a shared classroom space this winter, I think, rather than be growing the usual leafy greens. So there's a lot of folks around. There's a CSA pickup that's just wrapping up now with a couple hundred people here picking flowers and taking walks and playing with their kids. So, I mean, in terms of thinking about how we are experiencing and relating to climate change, I feel like I'm young in this, and climate is still feels like a new, like I don't know what the climate should look like in farming. I feel like I'm surprised every year at the patterns and the ways that things work. Just realized I have some slides here that are sort of unrelated, but I can pull up if I can find them. Oh well. So ways that our first and foremost way that we address climate change is the decision to use horses. So when we got here, we were farming with hand tools and a little walk-behind tractor, and we didn't have very much for tools. And we wanted to expand, and we knew that we were somewhat limited by that. We got here, this land's been used by some folks, Jay and Janet Bailey, who've been here for 45 years and had used draft horses for most of that time. And we suddenly were offered the use of all sorts of tools that we never had before: plows and mowers and cultivators and manure spreaders and logging equipment that we had no access to otherwise. And the only catch was that we had to learn how to use horses. So we started learning to do that, and we spent a lot of time just sort of sitting next to them, bouncing around as we learned to use horses, and eventually sort of fell in love with it and realized that it fit really well with both our sort of values in terms of how we wanted to farm, but also our values around our lifestyle and things. I think the greatest gift that has given us, it's not that we burn less oil because we're not using a tractor, although that's certainly true. I think that draft animals have shown us, sort of guided our choices around scale and pace as we've made decisions about how we run the farm. Farming is fast paced and stressful, and there's this constant drive to kind of get bigger, and as momentum happens for various reasons, it's hard to not get caught up in that. And I think that the horses have helped remind us of the sort of human scale that we wanted to work on, and more importantly, that like the sort of scale that has helped us to farm in ways that we felt were the right way to farm. So, in terms of kind of how we wanted to treat our soils and our animals and all the things that we've just been hearing about, the horses have helped us sort of maintain some focus in that way, which has been really, really helpful. We also started out as a purely annual tillage vegetable farm, and have slowly been learning why we should be finding other ways to do things. So we're also transitioning away from tillage. We still do a lot of tillage, in part because that's what horses are best set up to do. And like I think you mentioned, John, earlier that sort of that tillage and horses went out the door at the same time, and I think that's really appropriate because we used to spend a lot of time doing the fun work of driving a harrow around the fields, which I loved and felt really good. But we sort of have been seeing that that's not how we want to be farming. It's not the effect on the land that we want to be making. And now we do a lot of mulching and hand weeding and other things, which I find much less enjoyable, but are still part of sort of creating better effects. We burn all wood. We heat our greenhouses with wood. We heat our houses and our outbuildings with wood that we mostly get from here. We've sort of set these are all things that the horses can help us do in a way that a different system we would be much less self-reliant. Let's see. So I guess one thing that I think about in terms of how climate change is affecting our work and hurting us and sort of threatening our livelihood and our lifestyle is I mentioned that we work next to and we benefited from our neighbors and the folks that we sort of inherited much of our land from, who are older folks who've been farming for a long time here. And I learned everything that I had learned about farming from folks who were older and had been doing it for a long time. And there's this huge amount of knowledge and an incredible amount of sort of security, I felt like, in having a mentor or many mentors and having folks who sort of had something to, had been through this before and knew what to expect and could give us that sense of projection. And climate change throws that to the wind in ways that I find incredibly dangerous and just troublesome. So we had this drought this year. We have really, really sandy soil. We have to just pour nutrients into our land, and everything is dependent on water for us. The sort of the success of our year is always dependent on water. And the drought that we had, we narrowly missed losing a lot of crops, but we had a pretty rough season because of it. And that was something that was, it felt that the folks that we work with were sort of blown away. They weren't ready for it. They weren't prepared to sort of expect it. Not that anybody's going to expect the weather any given year, but the parameters, the historical record feels really challenging to predict. And that's something that we struggle with, and I'm still trying to come to terms with how we sort of go forward without that knowledge base in what we do. I think I will turn it over to you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse. And thank you, John and Lisa, as well, for sharing, for getting us started for the night. And now, so just to keep everyone up to date for the rest of the evening, our agenda, if you will, we're going to have a panel discussion for a little now. So pose some questions to our farmers and welcome any and all questions from everyone else out there in the audience. So like I said, you can type them in the chat, or if you can put an asterisk and we'll just let you ask the question yourself. And then we'll have a quick break and then reconvene around 8 and go into our breakout session. So if you haven't already, just click on that link in the chat and sign up for a breakout group, whichever one sounds most appealing to you. But I think the first question, our three panelists already kind of touched on some of the impacts of climate change and how they're adapting. But the first question I want to start off with is around soil health. And for all three of you, how do you build soil on your farm, and where do you see soil health kind of fitting into your overall idea of regenerative ag, or whatever kind of moniker you use for your farm? And I think maybe we'll mix up the order every time. Maybe we'll go Lisa, Jesse, John this time. So soil health, and how do you think it fits into your farm?
Soil health, when we first got our farm started, I'll say that Carl and I have been farming together for 20 years now. And we built our house on forest soil and really had to build a lot of organic matter. And the way we did that was really through our livestock and through using a lot of, so through livestock, being able to build our gardens, build the soil around our house by outwintering our animals and collecting the manure and the chaff that was left behind, and starting to do raised beds, and again, not disturbing the soil. Letting the grazing management had a large contributing piece to how we were able to build our soil around our house. But then with all our pastures that we have, some of our pastures, it's really hard to import fertility to them, aside from when we're buying in hay. And so having a really good grazing system, which is allowing us to manage our nutrients on our pasture. And then also when we're supplemental feeding our animals before the grazing season starts and at the end of the grazing season, that additional import of nutrients helps us build the soil. And with our gardens, I use a lot of mulch. We do a lot of mulch by using leaves, sometimes mulch hay, wood chips in the pathways, all these different sources of carbon to help trap the moisture and add organic matter, feeding the soil, feeding the microbes, feeding the earthworms. All of those things have helped make our soil more like a sponge that we're wanting. And again, moving away from tillage as much as we can. So the only parts of our gardens that are getting disturbed is where we're planting, putting our seeds in, or where we're transplanting our seedlings. So I think I might think of some other stuff. I'm sure there's lots of other things that I'm probably not thinking about. But even when we're managing our forest lands, we're thinking of the multi-layer effect of the various different ecological systems. So yeah, that's all I'll say for now, and I might come up with some other thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And we'll go to Jesse. Some thoughts on soils and soil health.
I mean, I agree that focusing on the organic matter in our soil is the number one thing that we think about, and all the things that head towards that goal are helpful. And we have lots of animals. We have 4 or 5 draft horses. We've had cows. We have right now we've got 20 sheep and 400 chickens and a handful of goats, all of which are sort of adding nutrients into the soil in various ways. But we also cover crop like crazy. Most of our land gets a lot of vegetable farmers are doing kind of multi-cropping in a given year, and we do a little bit of that. But mostly we grow one crop of vegetables and then 2 crops of cover crop, or one longer season cover crop in any given year. And frankly, we have a ton of weeds that are an amazingly powerful tool for capturing carbon, because they grow a lot faster than any of the cover crops that we buy and plant. And it's a struggle for us, but while we're growing our vegetables, we're also growing a lot of other things that are getting turned under, or not turned under, but turned into the soil and storing carbon and growing a lot of a lot of organisms. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Sounds awesome. I'll turn it over to John.
Yeah, so of course I go along with what my other colleagues are saying about farming for carbon, putting the carbon in organic matter. I think you put together a panel of like 3 kindred spirits here. We're all saying the same thing and on the same page. So, but maybe one thing I could add is that I like to think of soil as a living organism with, like a superorganism with all these parts that are coming together, and that we are basically soil. We eat all the plants and animals that are based on the soil. All terrestrial life on the planet is pretty much based on soil, and so is the aquatic life from the nutrients and stuff that come from the soil. So I like to think of soil with a little more reverence and think of maybe some kind of sacred relationship that we should have with soil, and not treat it like dirt, like the bumper sticker says. One of the things I think about is that we are I feel like a fruiting body of the soil. I'm soil having a human experience. And when I'm done, I'm going to go back into the soil and I'm going to spread around, and more things are going to have whatever experiences they have with the carbon and the phosphorus and the oxygen and hydrogen that comes from my body. So I think, just this reconnecting to the soil. I'm sure ancient civilizations were thinking along this line, and we've lost that connection. And we look at soil as something to, in conventional agriculture, it's something to sterilize, stick the plant in there, feed the plant with, water-soluble fertilizers and any pesticides that they might need to kill anything there, and then extract that plant to process and make food with. So I think that's just the wrong approach. So bring a little more reverence into our thoughts about soil, I think would be great for human society.
That's a great image of us as fruiting bodies of the soil. Some thoughts. I'll pose this to everyone, but also the panel, from Steve. I'm wondering if there's a scientific basis or accounting potential for carbon sequestration. So do any of you know of a specific way to kind of account for carbon sequestration? You don't have to go through each other formally, but I don't know if anything pops up.
Yeah, I'm going to say, there's different ways to measure it. In the soil, we can measure it by % organic matter. Basically, you get a soil test and they cook off all the carbon in the soil and they weigh it, and they can see what % is organic matter. So you can watch your soils over the years increase in organic matter if you're taking good care of them. And then, I'm not sure, I know there are scientists who work on this that can measure the above ground carbon in woody plants and things like that based on the amount of cover you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also Abe Collins is somebody out there, a Vermonter, that's doing a lot of research and coming up with ways to measure carbon in the soil. So I would look him up and see what he's been doing. I haven't been, I know that he's been really active, and he's got some technology that he's trying to introduce and actually collect data on, so that he can bring it out to the general public in a wider form. So Abe Collins, think it's carbon soil solution, if I'm correct. But there are things out there, there are people out there that are finding ways to make this measurable, because they're also trying to find ways for farmers to get compensated for good agricultural practices, and sequestering carbon as a way of turning things around in our environment. You know, they're trying to find ways for farmers to get compensated for those practices.
I'll just make a quick note that the NOFA quarterly, what's it called? The NOFA quarterly magazine that comes out, that Jack Kittredge edits and writes for, had a really wonderful sort of piece about a number of pieces about how to sort of measure carbon, and or on all the ways that should be thought about from a climate perspective, probably 2 years ago. And it was, to me, it was a really kind of hopeful way to think about things, because it's something that I feel like I have a lot of power over. We watch our soil carbon go up and down. We've watched it go up a lot since we've been working with our soil just in 10 years, and to be able to sort of quantify that and say, actually, this is the equivalent of that in all the other things that we see and hear about, was really hopeful and inspiring. So
That's awesome. These all these responses pivot really well into a question from Sophia. She's asking, have any of you farmers looked into programs or pilot programs that pay for soil carbon sequestration? And I know there's some talk about payment for ecosystem services at the state level, but I'm wondering if any of you all as farmers have thought about that as part of your business model or farm.
I sort of feel like it's not explicit, but we have a brand, if you will. Probably all three of us, most of Vermont, small scale or organic agriculture is sort of, there's a brand of people are buying our food and supporting us because of their belief in the environmental benefits of what we're doing. And I think that some environmental economist could make a pretty solid argument for sort of how to price that, or how that is working already. I certainly feel like our customers are loyal to us, not just because we grow the best bok choy, which isn't true, or they can't get things elsewhere, but because they care about how we farm, and that they feel like they have a stake in supporting us doing things the way that they believe should be done.
That's a good point. John, have you thought at all about programs that pay for soil carbon sequestration?
I have thought about it. I haven't looked into any. I would welcome being paid, but that's not actually why we do it. We do it because on this planet of 7 billion people, where most 50% of them live in urban populations, the access to land is difficult, and we have this privilege of managing and being stewards of land, and with that privilege also comes a responsibility to treat it well and try to improve it. So that's really our motivating practice. I do find a lot of USDA payments actually pay farmers who might be doing more harm to the soil, or who need to fix some problem that they have. They have some erosion, or their manure is leaking into the stream or something like that. So it'd be nice to get paid for something that we did.
That's a good point. Yeah. And Lisa, any thoughts on payment for soil carbon? No. I think you're muted, Lisa.
There. If there were payment programs out there, I would welcome it. Well, the thing that's challenging for me is oftentimes for different programs, the amount of paperwork that you have to go through just to prove that you're doing what you say that you're doing. And, you know, we've got less than 200 acres. So the amount of time that I put into applying for things, especially when it's government speak, is challenging and not fun. And like John said, we're doing it because we know that it's the right thing to do. I mean, I consider myself a steward of this farm, and I'm co-creating with this farm organism that and so it feeds me. It makes me know that I'm doing the right thing. But when I bring in agents from the outside that want me to prove that I'm doing something, it doesn't feel good. And it's hard to make the time for things like that when it's not necessarily going to pay for the time and effort that I'm putting into it. So I'm waiting, I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to go out and search for it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good perspective to share. Dreama had a question about, she's asking whether there is potential for community composting in the agricultural community. And I would kind of maybe expand that question to ask, do you all see kind of a lot of potential? Are you interested in kind of sharing more generally collective enterprises among farms and ways that farmers can cooperate? Thoughts on that? Maybe, Lisa, I'll go back to you first if that works.
So community composting, I think that that's an interesting concept. I would be interested in hearing what people have for ideas there. I think that there's a lot of education that needs to go along with this, and it would really require, I think, management and education for the people that are providing the products. Over the years, my husband and I have organized a couple events where we tried to just manage the compost on the event itself so that it was a zero waste event. And there's a lot of challenges with people not understanding what can go into a compost pile. So for community composting, I think it'd be great if there was an infrastructure and some level of oversight to educate and to manage what's being put in there and to make sure that there's correct ratios for effective composting. I think it's the time. I think it's the time to do this because now that we've got regulations that are requiring that people don't put their food waste in the landfill. It's definitely time. I would want people to be I'd like to see a system in place before I say, yeah, bring some to our farm. I want to make sure that it's being done correctly. Mm-hmm. And the other question you had?
Just about shared enterprises in general, like along those same lines, if you have any thoughts about that.
I definitely support the idea of shared enterprises or shared equipment when those things warrant, when that works for various operations. We love to share our knowledge. We don't necessarily have a lot of things. Well, actually, within our Draft Animal Power Network, we share a lot of equipment back and forth with other producers. I can't think of other things on our farm that we would necessarily be sharing because we're so small in scale and everything that we do is with draft animals or by hand. So, but in situations where I have seen other farms cooperatively sharing equipment for growing grains or for field cropping, I think that stuff can work really well, provided they're not trying to use the same piece of equipment in the same week. You know, that can be the challenge. But I think those models are really worth looking into and developing.
Definitely. Yeah, we'll go Jesse and then John, if you have anything to add, any other thoughts about community composting or community enterprises more generally.
This is something I'm really excited about. The compost idea is, I mean, Brattleboro has a municipal compost system now that's run by the Waste Management District. They're making pretty good compost as far as I can tell. The schools, I was amazed. We have a yet to be first grader who started school last year, and the entire school is making unbelievable amounts of compost, and to see the sort of level at which everybody was on board and was able to do this, and then to see the final product at the end was pretty inspiring. But I think a bigger opportunity is the idea of kind of shared resources among everybody. I think that we think of everything in terms of these, this sort of capitalist model of everybody has their own individualistic little island business and little island project, and we all sort of do things in parallel. And my experience is that the only way to get ahead in this sort of in this business is to work with other people about that. So like I mentioned, that we've shared lots of tools. We share our horses with another farm. It wouldn't work with everybody, but it works really well for us. We share most of our tools. This year, when our friend who had worked here for years and had started his own farm and didn't want to go to farmer's market because of COVID, and he was having a baby, and he needed a market, and we had this incredible surge in demand, so we networked with him, and we increased our CSA size by 20 or 25% and bought 20 or 25% of our food from him. Super transparent about how that was going to happen. And I just sat down with him this evening right before this and sort of had a little check-in, and both of us feel like it has that experience has exceeded our expectations for how it's working, and how we both feel like we are more, we have better selection. There's some resiliency in terms of like if something goes wrong on one of our farms, the other farm can pick up the slack. There's lots of really wonderful things about it. And we're now talking about buying a tractor together, because we've never owned a tractor and don't really want to own a tractor by ourselves because it's too big a cheese. But if we have access to one, it would be really useful. And so I think that, there's ways to do that. And we're also working with some folks we've been talking with other folks about the idea of sharing some of the sort of administrative burdens that are really heavy for us, at least in terms of bookkeeping and regulatory stuff and all the things that keep us in the office, and trying to sort of find ways that we can share that stuff with folks. Maybe hire a business manager with 6 or 7 farms together who are with someone who understands the ropes of all these things, and we don't each have to learn 800 little things ourselves and try to duplicate while we're also trying to run a farm.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse. John, any thoughts?
As far as community composting goes, I think its time has come now, and we have dabbled in that area a few years ago. We had a close the loop system where we were collecting food scraps from local schools and local businesses and feeding them through our laying hens, and then also taking some of that bedding and stuff and feeding it to worms. We had some vermicomposting going. So it was really fun to play around with it, but it had some downfalls for us. Particularly, we got a rat infestation from it, so that was no fun. And Nancy especially was not happy with the idea of the rats in the barn. One day I was getting I used to charge $10 to pick up a 35-gallon barrel of food scraps from each business, and so that was paying for itself. And then we could feed the chickens for free, and we were making eggs with very little grain, hardly any grain. So that was all good. But one day I was picking up one of those things, and it was full of rotten soup from the school, and I spilled it on me and hurt my back at the same time. And I came home and laid on the couch and said, I'm done with this. So it needs, we needed some tweaking and that, but I think, now with there's a lot more awareness about composting. And just like Lisa said, the systems need to be in place and worked out well ahead of time to kind of be proactive against the problems that are going to happen, like, hurt back. The kids are, we went into schools and trained the kids about how to sort the stuff, but there was always silverware and other stuff mixed in with the compost and little plastic scrap. So that was a great learning experience. And there are some, like Carl Hammer's been doing it in the Montpelier area, Buzz Ferber also in Barrie. Those guys collect food scraps and feed it through chickens. So I think it's a really great way to recycle this amazing resource that we've been treating as waste. And then just as far as the shared enterprises, I think, this whole idea of competition is a really bad idea. We should be looking more win-win situations. And I think farmers do realize that we're stronger when we all work together and share our knowledge and equipment. Or, so I think even like ideas, we've aggregated fruit or found markets for people that we couldn't fill. If we had a big wholesale order that we couldn't fill, we'd either collect the stuff and sell it all as one bundle or pass the information on to people. And just, a lot of this peer-to-peer passing of knowledge has been probably the most valuable through my career. As I've learned the most from other farmers. So, anybody who's going to be tight-lipped about their, proprietary secrets and stuff is not going to be well received in the community, and they're going to lose out. So it's good to share.
Thank you, John. We have some great information and everything in the chat and folks sharing some different ways to measure carbon. Rutland just started a community composting thing. But I want to pivot to, with some of the limited time we have left, just ask about the social component of resilience and sustainability. Because sometimes when you think about sustainability, it's like on the farm and ecosystems, but there's also social systems that have to support that. And so for you, three farmers, what systems kind of socially do you support you in practicing regenerative agriculture on your farm? And how do you think that Vermonters, maybe eaters, private citizens, folks like us in the audience, how can we better strengthen and support those systems? And this time maybe we'll go Jesse, John, Lisa. That works.
So this is why we sell to a CSA. It's not because it's more lucrative, because I don't think that's true. It's because we draw an incredible amount of strength and inspiration from our customers. And I think we shape our values from the values of our customers. When we sell to restaurants, I see our food get put up on a chalkboard or menu and sort of used pretty inaccurately many times to create this sort of whatever strange marketing thing they're trying to do. And it feels pretty disingenuous, and it feels pretty separate from what we're actually doing. But when people come to that, so all of our food is pretty much sold on the farm. And so every customer comes here and sees our messy place and all of our shit laying around, and most of the time they talk to us, and we just organically have these conversations about what people's goals are for their food, what their values are, what they and so we gain that from them, and they also gain from us the sort of direct perspective of what it's actually like to grow food, and we try to be incredibly honest about the joys and pitfalls of farming. And so I think that there's this community of people who, and I feel really accountable to my customers. When we decide to make decisions, a couple years ago, we started using tarps to work in this no-till system, really popular way of doing things. I was really conflicted about it. We started laying these big tarps out all over our fields, and we articulated why to our customers through newsletters and conversations, and immediately all these questions came back to us. Many people were supportive. They understood the idea of trying to reduce our tillage, and many people were concerned about the toxins that were coming out of the plastic, and what was happening to the plastic at the end use, and where was the plastic coming from, and how long it was going to last, and all those things that sort of those conversations we're having in real time. And they were conversations that were happening amongst our crew and between Caitlin and I, but also, but now I felt like we really had to follow through, and we had to sort of keep those conversations going, and we had to do our utmost to sort of minimize the damage that was caused by choosing to use this stuff that was really bad, despite the fact that there were also benefits. And that example could be duplicated in a million ways by having folks who are involved and understand, as much as is possible about how we do things and why. And I really appreciate that. I think it creates a better farm and a better ecosystem by sort of democratizing it a little bit that way.
Awesome. That's a really good point. Always keeping those conversations going. But I'll let John share any thoughts, and maybe Nancy in the background. Thoughts on the social systems that support you and how we could strengthen those systems.
I just whispered something in his ear.
So I got to go. So the thing she whispered in my ear is that we have a nursery now. But I just want to say Jesse's points are all great, and as we get older, we found working with the general public was exhausting. So we did a lot of farmers markets in our day, and we've done a lot of, we have the CSAs and farm market here on our place. So, but that's great, and I think that's really important work that you do. I want to touch on a couple things that we do there that Jesse didn't highlight, and probably does also. But we have a nursery, so we really enjoy having plant people coming on. We don't call them the general public because they like to grow plants and they want to learn about plants. So we're happy to have them on board and just to have them experience the miracle of planting a shrub and watching it turn flowers and berries and all the pollination and all that is really rewarding for us. We also do a lot of educational work with local colleges and universities. I think that's how we met Chris first, was through UVM agroecology class. And so I think that's an important social role to play, is to get people out on the farm, to get these young inquiring minds, and we get a lot of energy and ideas from them. And then the other thing was, this livable wage. I think there's a lot of people that are exploited in farming systems, a lot of workers. So we didn't want to be part of that. So we make sure, and we only pay our people like $12 to $15 an hour, but we also offer free room and a lot of food and things like that, so that we feel like we're not totally exploiting that you could make a living doing with that like they are. And oftentimes they're making more money than we are, to be honest with you. So that's something that we really have to keep in mind when we talk about social aspects of regenerative agriculture, is how we treat the workers.
Awesome. Thank you, John, for that. Lisa, thoughts on some of the social systems that support you at your farm and how we could strengthen those or lift those up?
I guess what we do on our farm is we have classes. We offer workshops, and that brings in people with specific interests where we can learn as a group. And I think those are really inspiring. Those really energize me. We also used to do farmers markets for a while, but our farm is so small in scale, it was hard to make it into some of the larger markets. It became exhausting. And so we've steered away from farmers markets. Not that it's not a good thing, it just didn't work for our scale and for the markets that we had access to. But we love having people come to the farm as long as they're at scheduled times, whether we're doing a class or we have a small farm store for people that are coming to pick up their pre-ordered vegetables or pre-ordered milk, things like that. So we do have a nice little flow of people that come through for that, and we really appreciate that support as well. We have a website, and we usually try to communicate with people on a monthly basis at least, to let them know what we're doing, and we get nice responses from that. But we do get inquiries from people that just want to come and visit the farm and just get a tour. And it's hard to do when you're like, it's busy. Farming life is busy. So that's where we try to also say, well, our time is valuable. If you want a tour, you want us to stop what we're doing, then we're asking for this contribution, and then we'd be happy to answer all your questions and take you for a walk. And so some people are willing to do that, and then it makes it really fun. They're engaged, they're making good use of their time, they're listening well. It's not just go to a petting zoo kind of thing. But as much as I love having people come to the farm, I also realize that there's a lot of liability along with that. And it is important that we're there with them to make sure that they don't feel like they can walk in and start petting our cows or go play with the calves or get zapped by an electric fence. So we have in the past brought in school groups that get tours on our farm, and that's wonderful. You get all these young minds that are asking 1,000 questions, and it's really exciting to know that we can show a small scale farm to an audience of young children that, I see some of them later on, and when they get into high school or beyond, and they'll share those memories of having visited our farm, and it sticks with them for, into adulthood, and it's a very memorable experience. So I feel grateful that we have that opportunity to share that. And as being involved as much as we are with rural Vermont, my husband and I get out pretty frequently, maybe not as often now as we have in the past, but going to certain events that they've organized or going to the State House to testify on important issues. And going to the State House and getting active has been a really important thing for us. And I hope to see more people there, especially when we're talking about issues like this.
Awesome. Those are all three really different responses and all awesome things that you all are engaged in socially. So that was, at least for me, really great to hear. And we are going to go try to stay on schedule, go to a 5-minute break in a sec. But first, just for you, Lisa, Anne had a quick question. Do you slaughter for other farms? And what are the rules and regulations that have to be in place for that? I know there are a lot of rules around on-farm slaughter, so you might not have time to dive into all of it. But.
Yeah. Actually, I answered Anne privately because she sent me a message as well. But in brief, there are, for everybody else, I know that it's a big issue. On-farm slaughter does have some regulations, but it does allow us to slaughter a small number of beef or pigs or sheep or goats and chicken on farm with, there are certain regulations you've got to follow. There have been some changes in the last year or two, so I'm not positive I know the actual numbers for poultry, but for poultry, it used to be that if it was less than 1,000 birds, you could slaughter on farm and even sell to restaurants. I think that number's gone up to maybe 5,000 birds now, but I could be wrong. So a lot of what we slaughter on farm are our poultry, and we have sold to restaurants, but mostly we sell to our customers that come to the farm and purchase a bird at a time, or they might reserve 10 or 20 for the season. And that works really well for us. It does mean that we can only sell whole birds. We can't break them into parts. And I don't recall the maximum number for beef or pork or sheep or goat, but it's somewhere around, 10 animals if they're smaller ruminants, and maybe 4 or 5, so we're way under the maximum amount with larger animals for on-farm slaughter. Our biggest issue with that is that you're required to bring in an itinerant slaughterer. Like, as a farmer, we can only sell a live animal to a customer, and then it's up to the customer to find their itinerant slaughterer that will kill the animal and then bring it and then cut it up, or you take it to a custom cutter. So the biggest issue we have with that is that my husband, Carl, is fantastic at doing humane slaughter. And when the animals know us and we set up a system so that it's seamless with no stress, it doesn't make sense for anybody else but Carl to be slaughtering that beef or that pig. And so we're hoping that when the legislative session comes up again, that we can be constantly tweaking that language so that the farmer could also be the itinerant slaughterer. So so I hope that answered the question, but no, we don't, as a farm, like just doing on farm, we can only do it for ourselves. If we were to start doing it for other people, we would have to put thousands of dollars into infrastructure on our farm just to follow the federal and state guidelines, and that's not where we're going to go.
Awesome. Thanks for that overview. And with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So get some water, stretch, and everything you need. And then when we come back, we'll go into our breakout sessions for the remainder of the evening. I think with that, Jael, if you're there.
Yep. I'm going to
can-
just throw the prompt or some discussion. Maybe it won't work. Trying to share some kind of prompts.
Yeah. I think Sophia and you and I can also share them within our groups.
Okay, great. Well, we can do that. Okay, I'm going to send everyone into their breakout group. Okay. Hope this works. Laura, what group do you want to go to? You want to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Those farms and activism would be great.
Okay.
My power went out, so I got booted off the meeting.
Oh. Did Chris make it back or did he lose power? There he is.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope it looks like everybody made it back for the most part. But we just got a couple minutes left, but gonna hear from one person briefly in each group and then thank our farmers. So maybe we'll go with the land access and land justice group first. Does anybody want to share just some of the things you touched on in your discussion?
I took some notes while we were discussing, so I can report back. Yeah, we had a really great conversation. We definitely, Jesse shared some more information about the small land trust that he worked with, Earth Bridge, and that seems like the idea of like community run land trusts that are sort of smaller in scale and more community oriented are helpful, but we also have to be careful to figure out ways to increase diversity and make sure that we're not perpetuating cycles of agricultural cronyism. So I thought that was a really good point. That model though is definitely sounds like made it much more possible for them to get a farm in the first place, which would have been otherwise out of reach. We noted a variety of other great organizations in the state that are working to link aspiring farmers with land, like LandLink and the Intervale, as well as land trusts. But there can be some issues with these if they're not well managed, or if there are like just a lot of expensive farms that are being sold more or less and not really being made accessible. And then the question again of like, is that actually allowing young farmers and a diverse population to get into the farming industry? But yeah, did you have anything else you guys wanted to share in addition?
That was a much better summary than I would have made, so thanks.
I think you captured most of it.
I put in the chat earlier about, I was asking the three farmers whether they're linked in with the Regenerative Food Network hub that Jesse McDougall runs down in Shaftesbury. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
So that I think is another way of getting funding. It's just starting in Vermont. They're going to eventually, hopefully, reach out to Maine and Massachusetts, Connecticut, and upstate New York. And some of you may know Bill LaBerge. He's well known in the state. He's grassroots solar, lives in Dorset. And he and Jesse McDougall and a corporation who, Michael Phillip, who used to be the leader of 350 Vermont's Earth Matters, they got together and got their heads together, and they're trying to help and support young farmers and people who want to do a regenerative agriculture system. So that may be another way to get some support financially.
Thanks.
Thanks for that info. I'll turn it over to the activism and sustainability education group briefly to share. We're about out of time, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but if people do want to stay on and hear what folks shared.
Okay, I took some notes for that group. Somebody suggested that regenerative agriculture in itself, it feels like activism of some kind, but we need to make it more visible, and we need to outreach and educate people about what regenerative agriculture is. So we started talking about using webinars, free educational webinars and presentations for schools and for the community. But often farmers need, they don't have the time for this, and they need support technical assistance. So that might be a way that community members can help farmers.
It's good for homeschooling also. As far as pandemic, a lot of students are going to be learning from home as opposed to in the school. And then also relating it to justice and equity. So that, that there are people who sometimes don't have access to food sources and good nutritious food, and to relate that into the whole justice and equity movement. And getting local food into school systems, less focus on dairy farmers in the Department of Agriculture in Montpelier, and more focus on sustainable farming, trying to lobby for that, to advocate for that more. And basically, we need to have a louder voice. We've got NOFA and VPIRG and rural Vermont, but we need to get more, a louder voice to lobby for these things. I think that's everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. We do need to have a louder voice. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Doug briefly to talk about what we discussed in our perennial polycultures group.
Hey, Annie, how you doing?
I'm fine, Doug. It's good to see you.
I just want to say that we have a woman here from New York, from Manhattan in Brattleboro, who is doing exactly what you're talking about. She started a regenerative, it's called Edible Brattleboro. So maybe we ought to introduce you. I live in Putney on Main Street, which is Highway 5, US 5. About a fifth of my acre. I have an acre of land on Main Street in Putney. A fifth of an acre is on the road, and about a third of the acre is woods. And in the middle, there's about at least a half an acre that I'm turning into a regenerative little farm. I have an orchard and a bunch of, I planted 15 trees last year when I first moved in, every year after I moved in. And it's planted in rye, and put a lot of pollinators down there. And my big thing this year is, I didn't mention this to the group, but I've got a bunch of about 80 milkweed, everywhere from little ones to big ones. So I'm going to have monarchs hopefully landing in my field. Basically, my intention is to become self-sustaining, because I really believe that the price of oil is going to skyrocket soon due to scarcity, because they haven't been drilling because of the price has been so low. Having worked at Exxon, I understand how they think. So I think we all need to think in terms of being self-sustaining. And that's why I'm here in this webinar. And thank you, Jael, for putting this together.
It was all Chris.
Who's that?
She said it was all me, but that is not true. It was all our farmers.
Okay, well, thank you all. I appreciate John and Chris. Well, we talked about stone fruit and apple scabs and applesauce and cherries and all kinds of things too, besides, but did I cover everything, Chris?
I believe so, for the most part. Yeah.
We talked about a lot. John was a wealth of knowledge.
Awesome. And with that, I do just really want to take a moment to thank our farmers and finish up here, because I know Lisa mentioned this and Jesse and John are probably thinking this, but being a farmer in the summer in our short growing season here in Vermont is just insanely busy. And for them to take an evening out of their time to be here with us is really awesome. And I certainly appreciate it. I hope you all do as well.
I do.
And thank you. And if folks want to have any announcements or kind of further events or anything they want to bring to everyone's attention, feel free to put that in the chat. We'll keep it open for a few minutes. But it looks like Steve mentioned that if Catherine Sims from the NEK wins her seat, she'd be a great advocate for local food. And some thank yous to our farmers, but it is the primaries tonight, so who knows? Maybe we'll see some of the results trickling in the next few hours. But thank you all so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Can I ask Jesse, where's his farm? Where's your farm, Jesse?
We're on Upper Dummerston Road in Brattleboro, so just near Route 30, just outside of town.
Might come visit you.
Yeah.
Please do. Please do.
Thank you all.
Thanks 350 folks. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
everyone
Jesse.
can
Yeah, thanks. Terrific.
turn on their mic for a sec if they want. Say bye.
Yeah.
Good to
Bye.
hear everybody's
Thank
Bye,
voice.
everybody.
So
Thanks,
thank you,
Bye.
Jess.
thanks a million.
Thank you, John. Good to see everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Jesse, what's your actual address?
Oh, 511 Upper Dummerston Road.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Bye all.
Take care.